All right, all right, all right. Aloha Friday, everybody. Thank you for being with us on this beautiful Friday. I don't know where you are in the world, but wherever you're joining us from, let us know in the comments so that we can greet you. Today is a special day as I share this Friday with my brother, Rich Bishop, an Outlier Project member and fellow entrepreneur, because he owns his own company. Rich, it is so good to host you today on Aloha Friday Live. How you doing, my brother?
Doing great, Enrique. It's good to see you, man.
Same here, same here. Now, folks, we'll be concentrating on things that deal with business, mainly revenue generating activity, how to prepare for a potential merger acquisition, how to be the best business person you can be. And I couldn't have brought on a better guest than Rich, because he's doing it for himself. He's done it for other people, and we'll be talking about that here in a little while. But before we get into all the great commentary and the discussion, Rich, tell us a little bit about you and what you're doing.
Yeah, so I am a business consultant focused on revenue strategy and operations. I've been in the finance world, I've been in operations, and kind of bounced between some of those roles for years before jumping over to sales operations, which over the last 5 to 10 years has really kind of grown and turned into revenue operations, really looking at how a business ticks from the front end in marketing through the sales activities, then all the way through to handing a customer over to client success, or customer success, as you call it, through the implementation process and so on. And all of those pieces are so interconnected in that customer journey. We really focus on making sure that it's not just sales that are being focused on, but how that customer journey takes place, because revenue is generated not only from new customers coming in the door, but also the existing customers, and cross-sell, upsell opportunities for them to purchase more and to stay with you, but also in terms of referral business and so on. So really making sure that that customer is taken care of from start to finish.
Outstanding, Al. You have your own company, Rich. Tell us a little bit about that and what drove you to that, because I know you worked with other people before, but now you're doing this for yourself.
Yeah, so I've worked with mainly privately held companies. I have worked inside of publicly traded companies as well, but most recently in the private equity world, and really got to see what that private equity process was like, of looking at companies, really coming up with the thesis for the investment, making the determination as to whether we want to invest in another company or not. Once that takes place, how do we grow that company and really get the value out of that holding period? And really learned a lot in that process, and what it takes for a company to truly be successful in that process and in those growth stages. And I really enjoyed being in those growth stages with all of the change and the fast pace movement that takes place there. It's not for everybody. But if you do really enjoy that fast-paced environment, it's a lot of fun to be a part of. And now, about a year ago or so, I branched off and created Midgame Consulting, which is really focused on the moves that a company makes in the middle of their game, so to speak. So not necessarily how you start the company, but after you've started, you've got to make some adjustments and moves, kind of like in halftime of football, right? The coaches a lot of times will make halftime adjustments, and you'll see sometimes a very different team in the second half than you saw in the first half. I think in many ways, companies are the same way. So those moves that you make in the middle of that game really sets up the end of the game for you, and getting the best results.
I love that you use that football metaphor, or at least that framework, because for those of us that like football and understand it, we understand that the team starts off with an agenda, right? And it's usually the win, right? They all want to start off and they want to win. Just like people in business, they start off with this end in mind, and it's usually wrapped around the win, right? Whether I sell my company or I get bought out, or however, but like a lot of teams, the first quarter shows up And you're like, who is that playing? And why are they not at a high school somewhere, right?
Yeah.
Because the plans just don't fall into place. There's so many individual contributors to that
Mhm.
initial goal that at any given time, any one of those can really toss this thing astray. And in business, we have this mindset of, hey, we're gonna, bring this thing to market, and it's gonna be the greatest thing since sliced bread. And then we add people to that vision and
Mhm.
that hope, but their individual contributions don't match what is actually required to get them to the next stage, and it could potentially go astray to the tune of most companies that start out within a 5-year period, they're gone, right? So um
Yeah.
and I loved how
Yeah.
you mentioned that midpoint, because it is a great point to get yourself to reassess, and then potentially, like you said, come back on the field and just clobber the smack out of the opponent. Um,
That's right.
so let's talk about, and I know that you said you don't focus on the beginning stage, but there are things that I think from the midpoint on, that if a company
Yes.
did in the early stage, they would be in a whole lot better position for when you come in at the midpoint. So what would those things be
Absolutely.
from your perspective?
Yeah, absolutely. And for that reason, I do work with some startups as well that are a little bit more forward thinking, right? They have that end in mind, and maybe the owner is starting this, and they have a 5-year period where they're looking to exit, right? So whenever you're working with companies, it's the companies that are the most agile that are the ones that end up succeeding in the long run, right? They can
Okay.
constantly make adjustments. If you were to look at, say, IBM, for example, IBM is International Business Machines. They started off long ago in the business machine world, creating computers and so on. But if you look now, they're a consulting company, right? They don't make computers and machines anymore. They're in artificial intelligence and they're in consulting. So even big companies like that have a reputation that's in a certain area have to evolve and change over time. So when we work with the startup world or entrepreneurs, it's how nimble can you be, and really making sure that you've got systems and processes that are set up that allow you to adjust, and also make sure that you're making the right kind of financial commitments as well, because that's one of the areas where we see a lot of founders will get themselves in trouble, right? They will start up a business and they will take on too much of a commitment for real estate, for example, or other things where, as the market is adjusting, they're stuck and they're not able to make the moves that they need to make in order to set themselves up for that next step. So it's constantly coming back to how agile can you be, and how much can you allow your systems and processes to guide some of the day-to-day, so that you can continue to keep your eyes on 2, 3, 12 months down the road, so that you're always staying a step ahead.
And you mentioned the awareness to commitment. I tell you, so sometimes we think that if we have octopus type of mentality on business, that we're going to do ourselves a service. And what it ends up being is that we tend to grab the thing that we don't need. And so
Yeah.
usually first you just want to, move the ball. You just want to move the ball, and you say, okay, if I get this right here,
Mhm.
if I get that right there, and then before you know it, you're burdened with excessive things that you don't need at this time. And so I love that you mentioned that piece of awareness of what your current commitments are, because if you are overcommitted too early, you may end up, succumbing to the weight of those commitments and not even make it to halftime, Lord forbid. That, and it's usually what.
Right. Yeah, and bandwidth is a big issue here too, right? Especially for the entrepreneur, but that continues even as the company gets larger. Even if you're $100 million company, $300 million company, the challenges may be different, but the bandwidth issues are always there, right? So how do you make sure that you're focusing your time on the right needle movers? And one of the common things that I see with entrepreneurs, and frankly, as an entrepreneur, I fight this myself too, is keeping your eye on what's going to bring the most value to the business, right? What is that right next step? Sometimes it's easier to keep your head down and to focus on a particular area of the business because it's what you're comfortable with, it's what you know. If you look at a founder who's really strong in engineering, say, right? And there are a lot of startup founders that were engineers, programmers somewhere else, developers, that they love to develop. And so it's real easy for them to sit behind the computer and just work on code all day long. But that's not necessarily going to move the needle forward if you're also trying to drive it as a business. You've got to be out front, you've got to be selling, you've got to be working with partners and so on. And so sometimes you've got to step back and evaluate, am I doing the easy thing or am I doing the right thing? And making sure that you're constantly evaluating and working on that next right step for you.
Absolutely. And that's a great question to ask yourself. If you're currently in business, are you doing the easy thing or the right thing? Because, hey, we can all do the easy thing all day long, right? There's things that are inherently more easier for me to do. And if I'm busy doing that and not doing, by your example, the sales and the outfront work and speaking to other potential collaborators or people who may be able to support our mission and things like that, then what will be what we refer to is working in the business and not on the business, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, thanks for that. Now, the person is, let's say, okay, hey, yeah, I'm aware of what I'm committed to, and I have the things in the right place, and we're just moseying along. I mentioned earlier the fact of bringing in people. How important have you seen that to be on positioning yourself, even to get to the mid game, before you start thinking, all right, let's get this thing ready to sell or to sell? How important has that been in your perspective as you evaluate companies?
Oh, it's absolutely critical because it then comes back down to the bandwidth issue, right? If I'm trying to do my books and I'm also trying to do my marketing and my advertising and my SEO work with Google, if I'm also then trying to build the product, right? Like you can see how downstream, all of a sudden I have so much on my plate that I'm overwhelmed. And for a lot of entrepreneurs and founders, it's hard to give up some areas of the business because maybe you enjoy doing the marketing or the SEO work, for example, right? Or in the developer example, maybe you enjoy coding. And sometimes those things can be the hardest to give up, but it also may be the most important for you to give up as well, because there are so many ways now, especially in this virtual economy that we have, that you can hire a VA for pretty inexpensively, right, to be able to do certain aspects of the job. So a key exercise to go through in that entrepreneur type role is to actually list out all of the different roles and responsibilities that you are taking on as the owner. And what of those roles and responsibilities could go to somebody else, even on a part-time basis, right? But how do you list those out and actually taking a look at what responsibilities do I have, bullet point by bullet point, almost as if you were creating a job description. And then sometimes that exercise can help you separate out, okay, maybe it's not the best value for me to be doing this thing. Maybe it's not the best value for me to be managing social media when I can get somebody to do that for me relatively inexpensively, right? So you constantly have to balance how much is my time worth on an hour by hour basis. And there are ways that you can calculate and get to that. And then how much would I be spending for somebody else to do this same kind of work? And the piece to look at with that is there are a lot of entrepreneurs that have a hard time giving those things up because this other person can't do it nearly as good as I can. But maybe somebody else could do it 75 or 80% as good as you. And maybe that's good enough for what you need in order to move forward and be able to free up your time to work on other areas of the business.
Yeah, the difference between perfect and good enough is it's critical. And you have to know that sometimes good enough is enough. And there's a lot of perfectionists out there, and they want to, this needs to be perfect. Good luck with that, because this world don't operate on perfect, right? It's an imperfect world because we're imperfect people. So how can you expect perfect? But you have to really get to the point where you say, hey, this meets enough of the threshold that I require in order to get this thing over to the next level, and and iterate, right? Innovative by doing things over again, hopefully not the same bad thing, but things over again, and perfect that or improve that in order to get you a little closer to where you feel that you're happy. And great advice there. So in the world of business, you can't be in it if you're not getting any type of revenue, right? So I have spoken to some people and say, well, if you're not generating revenue, then you have a great hobby. And I hope you're happy with that, because that's as far as you're going to get if you're not generating that revenue. So what has been some of the things that have held people back the most when it comes to revenue and generating that?
Yeah, there are a number of different aspects that you can look at. I would say first and foremost is not having a follow-up process or a sales process to begin with. That's one of those areas that we've been able to help a number of companies, even some of the larger end of the spectrum, right? So this is true for companies of all size. If you don't have a process or a way of doing things that you can create consistency, then you're going to constantly deal with the ups and the downs, where you're going to have a big windfall after a lot of work, right? But then if you're not continually kind of pushing that, pushing that agenda and moving that ball forward, then you're going to be left with a fall off to then have to do all of that work all over again. So you see this kind of cycle a lot, where especially in the consulting world, you see where there's a lot of work and effort going into sales, and then there's the fulfillment that takes place, but you're not continuing with the sales piece of it, and then you've got to start all over again, right? So consistency is the biggest key, and there are systems and processes that you can set up using tools, using VAs, using outside companies to help keep some of that momentum going. But the consistency in keeping that momentum going will generate at least some predictability that you can then start to work with.
And consistency has been often referred to in any example of success, right? Yeah. If you want to be successful at video, they tell you got to be consistent. If you want to be successful in podcasting, you got to be consistent. Mm-hmm. So this is a word that we should really be very well acquainted with. Yeah, it's a struggle for folks. And I think that, the difference between their visions or dreams at whatever thing that they want to do and the realization of the commitment necessary, it just hits you in the face, right? It's like Mike Tyson, right? Everybody has a plan till you get punched in the mouth. Consistency comes with a realization that there is a level of commitment required more than what you're normally used to in order to get consistent. And so a lot of people have struggles with that. So, I know this is not a self-development episode we're talking about here, but what would you tell somebody that's at that point? I mean, they're at the cusp of consistency, but they're struggling with whatever steps that need to get them there.
Yeah, that's such a good one, because there was a book that I read recently, and forgive me, the authors escape me at this point, but it's 10x is easier than 2x, and it's all about really reinventing yourself and creating a new you every so often, and it, life and advancements in life aren't necessarily a straight line. It's more of a step with the way that it works. And you bringing up personal development is spot on, because it's how you evolve and change as a person that will level you up at each stage of the process. And so within business, you see this with promotions, right? You go from being an associate to a manager to a VP to then C-level, right? And a lot of times it's the work that you're putting in on a day-to-day basis that eventually reaches the tipping point, and then you hit that step right to the next level. Entrepreneurship is the same way. Your business is going to go through this, where you have to constantly keep moving and work on habits. That's another great book, by the way, Charles Duhigg, The Power of Habit, where that consistency of creating that new that you're building and continuing to work on that will help you hit those different steps. And sometimes it can be really frustrating, because you're putting in the work and not seeing the result for a long time, and then eventually it just seems like it clicks. And Enrique, I'm sure you've seen this too, but I've seen it over and over again, personally and with companies that I work with, that it takes a lot of effort and energy to do something for the first time. It takes a little bit less energy and effort the second time, and the third time, and the fourth time. It slowly gets easier and easier until it becomes a habit. And that only can become a habit through consistency. So keeping with it, continuing to challenge yourself to do that next right thing, even if it is really hard, even if there is a long tail. If it's going to get you in your career to the next level, or your business to that next level, then it's worth putting in the energy and effort.
Absolutely. And personal development, folks, if you've not gone that route in terms of business and what you do in business, take a look at that area. I know you're looking at books. I know you're looking at manpower. I know you're looking at resources, this, that, and the other. But you cannot overlook yourself, because you are the brain and the vision behind whatever business you're in. And if you're not developing, then you are, in all sense of the word, you are the lid to your company. And wherever that lid is, that's as far as you're going to go. So give yourself at least some credit, and give yourself some ability to raise that bar, raise that lid, and allow at least your people to get higher. If you don't want to go nowhere, let them know so that they can move on. But if you don't want to go anywhere, then you can't expect your business to go anywhere. That's just it, right? So
that's right.
Great
That's
point
right.
there. So,
and Enrique,
yeah.
To that, yeah, I just wanted to add something to that point too, because entrepreneurship can be a very lonely place. You're putting in a lot of energy and effort into keeping your business going. And this can happen in larger companies as well, in management levels, where you can feel like you're alone, because you have so much on your plate. Your head's down trying to take care of the work, that sometimes we get where we don't pick our head up and look at the landscape overall to see, are we continuing to move in the right direction? And so entrepreneurs as well, it can be a very lonely place. So I know we're a part of some communities together, but I can't emphasize enough the power of community with other people that are in similar kind of places with you, just to be able to be connected with people that understand where you're coming from, that understand your challenges, and maybe they've even been there before and can help you through it. But being able to stay connected with others that are in similar stages of life or having similar challenges is so critical to helping you get through this and to helping you continue to grow your business or your career.
Yesterday I was looking at another reminder, because it was I knew this, I've seen this before, and it's all about journey. And if you want to go fast, you by all means go by yourself, because how much you can run. But if you want to go far, you can't do it by yourself. You got to get someone to carry your weight, and then you carry the weight, and then and go like that. And so collaboration, community is huge in expecting a grandeur type of result to what you have planned. And community can get you there faster, in terms of how long you are in play. And so as we're talking now, and we're getting to that midpoint, right, where you come in, there's a lot of things that we've spoken that can prep somebody to get to this point. And if you've learned anything in that first section there that we've covered here in the last 27 minutes or so, hopefully it'll get you in a better position to be where we're going to go focus on now, which is the midpoint. So when you get to, let's say, visit a company or address a company at this point, what does that company look like at the midpoint?
Yeah, it's more about, I would say, the maturity of the company than the financials. Because there are a lot of people that will talk about the size of company being a key determinant to who are you working with, how do you segment your business, that sort of thing. And I've found that there are some large businesses in the hundreds of millions of dollars a year in revenue that have the same challenges that a $5 million roofing company has. And so, it's how you are, where you are in that life cycle or that maturity stage. And with that, it basically looks like, the company has done well up to this point by doing things a certain way. They understand that in order for them to get to the next level, that there are some changes that need to be made. They need to do things differently. So whether that be managing the finances, whether that be putting in new sales processes, whether that be optimizing the sales processes that they already have. It all depends on what the goal of that company is for the end state. For some entrepreneurs, it's to be able to sell the company. For private equity owned companies, which is an area that I work with a lot, for them, it's to get to that next level, to grow, and 5 years from now, be ready to be able to make our owners a profit, but also still have enough potential for our next owners to then make a profit from there. So it really comes down to making sure that we're ready to make the changes for whatever that next stage is for us. And we love working with companies that have different goals, right, across the board, but that are truly ready to transform themselves and to be a different business 2-3 years down the road based on the moves that they're going to make today.
Absolutely. Now, I want to take this time to thank Gabe, my brother. He put this show on his stream, or actually he posted about it. And so thank you, Gabe, for supporting us here on Aloha Friday Live. And if you don't know Gabe, contact him, connect with him, and follow his work, because he is an amazing person and a content creator. So and thank you all, the rest of the folks that I see that are joining us, by all means, let us know that you are joining us in the comments so that we can greet you. So you talk about maturity. Maturity comes in different ways, different forms, but in terms of the business, maturity has a lot to do with their mindset, right? And so because we can get sidetracked by the tangibles, right? You look at your books and you're like, oh man, and you look at we got a payroll. Oh my goodness, and then you could look at the limitations of your current resources and really have a dismal approach or thought about your business. But a person that has a level of maturity in their mind towards business will look at that and say, okay, this is what it is today. And I'm not going to negate the fact that this is real, right? This is what it is. But this won't be what determines where we're going. And that takes a very strong person, a very secure person, a definitely faith-based person in terms of their hope of the future. And how has that played in, and I know you look for these things, right? These are things that you're looking for, but how has that played out as you take a company from midpoint forward in terms of maybe other people that you've seen that have had a different outlook?
Yeah, and it's interesting. That tends to be one that's hard to really get to the bottom of, because there are a lot of people that say they're ready to make the change and they know what changes need to be made. But then when the rubber meets the road, they don't actually make the change and put the work in. And as we were talking about a little bit earlier, in order to make a change, it takes a lot of energy and effort. There's a reason why we talk about it as growth. Growth takes energy. And so you have to be willing to do that and to put that work in. And so what has been refreshing is I have been blessed to work with a number of different companies that not only want to make the change, but they bring the resources in to make that change. Sometimes that means, bringing new people in and new energy into the team in order to get these initiatives off the ground and running. And the consistency of doing that new process over and over again then creates that new level that they are at. So working with people who are truly passionate about what they do, that they know that in order to get to that next level, it's not just lip service. It actually is going to take work, and quite a bit of work. Depending on how big the business is, the energy and effort to change that's needed to change just gets greater as the company gets bigger. So it takes more of an effort to do that. You've got to have the stamina, you've got to have the passion for what you're doing, and you've got to have the faith, as you talked about, in what this thing that we're working on can become. And having that vision that's set and everybody aligned to that vision is absolutely critical to making sure that we can all stay on that same path.
Amazing. Now, folks, if you've never heard this, I'll say it here. What got you here won't necessarily get you there. And so if you're going from here to there, a lot of times the struggle really is these relationships that have been built. And hey, by all means, have relationships with people, right? Employ people. You're employing people. You're bringing families into your business. And so, yeah, get to know them, share life together, processes together, work together, all that stuff. But there's a line between business future and what you're comfortable with. And a lot, it's hard to let go of people that you've built relationship with. Yeah. But if you aim to, like you said, rubber meet the road, you have to understand that some of those, and I want to be careful how I say this, because I'm not telling people or suggesting that you cut people out of your life. But there are some connections that don't no longer serve you. And you have to know when to disconnect that particular thing, right? You can still treat people humanely and as they are humans, right? And people. But if you want your company to go there, some things you'll have to cut out. And you could do that very nicely. You don't have to be like, hey, I'm sorry. Yeah, you're not going to take me to my next level. I got to get rid of you. You have to say that. But you could definitely convey the fact that you appreciate how far they have brought you. Because if it wasn't for them, you wouldn't be in a position to go there. But that you require some other resources that they possibly can't offer. And that's fine, because it would be immature for me to think that I could take you there and know that I'm like capped out, right? And so it takes maturity on both sides. But if you want to go there, consider the fact that some things will be needed to be shed, and maybe, you know, have a different type of relationship there, because if you want your business to thrive, you'll do that. And I guess that's what you've seen, those that say they want to and those that actually do put everything in making sure that it happens. So
yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, the stages that a company hits, you hit the nail on the head. And I think it also goes back to the comment you were making earlier about people's lids, right? We all have different lids and caps to our ability, and we can work on our own lids and constantly try to drive it up, which will give us a greater capacity. But as a business changes, what it takes to run a successful $10 million a year business is very different than what it takes to run a $100 million business, right? And those are very, very different. And as a company makes that move, there are going to be quite a few people that either their lid isn't in the right place for $100 million and they're not willing to get there, or they're not able to get there, right? Like, there are so many different dynamics that come into play, but the organization is going to look very, very different at 100 million than it did at 10, even if it's a fast rise, right? Especially if that business wants to stay sustainable for the long term, they have to continually change and adjust and adapt. And often that means that there are some people who can make that move and stay with that company from 10 to 100, but there are going to be quite a few that just aren't. And to your point, you can absolutely appreciate what they did, but if you're going to get to that larger level, you're going to have to make the changes in order to get there.
Yeah, absolutely, folks. And I mean, it's just simple. If you're always playing in the 3 foot in the pool, right, and everybody's accustomed to that, and they don't want to go to 6 and 12, that you can't take them. People gonna drown, right? So you got to think of it that way in order to get there. So, Rich, you're moving this ball with these people from midpoint on, right? And you talk about the mentality, and it is totally factual, folks. The people that play at the $100 million level have a totally different mind. They're still human, but the way they think about money, about revenue, about future is different. And so I've heard this from a good friend of mine that's multimillionaire now, and he would tell me, you can't sit at $1 million table, Enrique. It's like, because you have the 100,000 type of activity and mindset, and everything about you is in that area, you know, and he's right. I would love to be one day, but he's put a whole lot of effort into getting to that table, and effort that I haven't done. Right. So you also have to be conscious, self-aware, and true to the facts that are there. And so, yeah, very, very right when you said that. Now, you're marching this company down the road. They're enjoying the fact that they now have, you know, adjusted some things, put some resources to some things. What has been the greatest impact that you have seen from these commitments that you have brought people to, where they say, all right, and let's just say maybe not all financial, but how have you seen people flourish from that point on when you're taking them to what might be their, you know, their glory days?
Yeah, so many different examples to think about there. I mean, you've got some where they were able to hit financially their dreams and what it is that they were wanting out of life. For some people, it's freedom, financial freedom, and getting there, and with the right kind of growth and the right kind of decisions along the way, you can absolutely get there. For me, one of the things that I really make sure I do is I love to roll up my sleeves and get into it with the teams. And I know that there are large consulting firms and other consulting firms out there that are very, very good at strategy. And they can put an amazing strategy together with market research, and they can have some fantastic next steps. But when it comes to actually putting the tactics in place and helping to make the change happen, maybe they struggle a little bit. And that's one of the areas where, for me, I've really enjoyed working on the strategy side, but also then turning it into, okay, now how do we actually implement this? And let's start implementing it together, right? So I'll roll up my sleeves and work with a number of the individuals on the team on some of the changes that need to take place, some of the new habits that we need to have, right? And help to kind of implement those changes and make those new habits a reality. And the change on the other side comes in with, oh my God, I didn't know we could actually do this. I didn't know that we could actually get these kind of results, but it works. And now I'm better for it, right? And I've seen a number of people where sometimes this change was the unlock for them to hit that next level in their own careers or with their own business leadership, where it was this one area that they needed to add to their arsenal. And now all of a sudden they're taking off. So I've seen it from, sales operations analysts that have gone on to become directors and VPs just 5 to 10 years later because of some of those unlocks. So I've really enjoyed that side of it. Yes, the financial side of it for companies is great. And I know that that's a big motivator for many people in that space. But for me, I've always gotten the most enjoyment out of seeing some of the personal transformations that can take place with some of these changes that we're implementing.
And I love that you say, getting in and rolling up your sleeve, because when you have someone, and in the military, we say operational, strategic, and tactical, right? So there's 3 areas that we operate. Obviously, there's the big brains saying, hey, this is what it looks like from 30,000 foot. And then you got the, those that are surveying and looking at the teams and all that. And then you got your executors. If I'd never seen none of them generals come down or admirals come down, none, right? None. And that would be so impactful. That would, if you talk, and now we inherently will take a mission, and regardless of who said it, if that's the mission, we're going to take care of it. But how powerful is that piece of rolling up your sleeve as a person that's given this guidance and also implementing some of those things? Because if you ask me, man, you got a win-win position as a consultant, because not only are you bringing some of the solutions that you think best suits this company at their current stage or in their current position, but you're also reaping some of the joy from actually putting these things into play and seeing the dynamics of the team change. Because, folks, it's one thing to get advice. It's another one to implement it. It's a third level of that, where you actually see the different changes that occur within this team, and how each and remember, I spoke about individual contributors early. It could really mess you up in some instances, but it could really make you flourish in others. And so, wow, that's a great approach to consulting and your business that, you hardly ever see in any of the other consultants. Because, hey, I've consulted, I've sat on the other side of a phone or on the other side of a video and given my 2 cents, and that was it.
Yep.
I didn't have the ability to go and actually do that. So what a blessing you have to bring that into the services that you provide. Now, let's talk about those services, right? And you kind of mentioned them earlier, but if a person said, hey, I saw this Aloha Friday Live, I saw Rich on there talk about what he does and rolling up his sleeve. number one, talk about your ideal client, right? And then talk about um, how you're going to come alongside them and help them out.
Yeah. So my ideal client is a growth stage company, and that can take many different shapes and sizes, and a number of different industries as well. But that they're of the mind that they know what their endpoint is, or they know where they want to get, and they may not be sure of exactly how to get there. They may know that, hey, we need to increase sales, we need to double our sales, or we need to open up new markets, and I'm not quite sure how to make that happen. That's an area where I'd love to come in and help. We can workshop some of those scenarios, put a plan together, then work through the tactics of how do we actually start implementing this. So for me, some of the more common areas where I've been involved are standing up a revenue operations organization. They know that the sales team needs more support, and they're not quite sure what that looks like, but they're willing to invest in that and get the sales team the support that they need to grow. So working with standing those teams up, putting new sales compensation plans together to make sure that the sales team is motivated in a way that will continue to drive sales, but is not necessarily going to break the bank on the other end too. So finding that balance between the two. And the big one right now with this time of year, we're recording this on August 30th. It's really getting into budgeting and planning time for 2025. And so how do we look at the budget in a way that we can make sure the sales plan is going to line up with the financial plans of the company? And Enrique, you'd be surprised at how many companies out there still have one set of numbers for the board that they're running their financial budgets against, but the sales plans that they have put together with the sales team don't add up to cover that financial budget. That can be a major problem. You're going to get halfway through the year and then, what do we do? Because our sales people are hitting their numbers, but we're not hitting our financials. So I'm working now with a lot of companies to put those pieces together to make sure there's an integrated budgeting plan that includes the sales plan, a part of that in a way that's going to be solid to make sure that everything is connected along the way. So to that point, I've actually put together a sales plan success guide, which is free for anybody that's interested, but it talks through how to make those steps and to have that plan set up so that you don't get halfway through next year and have hockey stick hit at the end of the year with the numbers, that you actually are confident in the plan going into it next year. So if anybody would like a copy of that, feel free to connect with me here on LinkedIn and direct message me, and I'll be glad to get you over that copy for free.
Absolutely. Now that's a huge resource, and we thank you for that, Rich. I know that anyone that's listening and is having some issues with their sales or how to get that right will benefit from that, folks. We'll have a link also in the comments for you to be able to get that from Rich. But by all means, connect with him on LinkedIn if you want that resource. Now, Rich, do you have anything coming up outside of your consulting? Are you working on anything here in the future that folks should be keyed into? And I know you mentioned LinkedIn, but how would you want them to communicate with you if it's not through LinkedIn, other sources?
Yeah, absolutely. So we can always go to midgameconsulting.com. And there's always more information there as well. And phone numbers, email addresses are all there for you. This piece about the sales plan and having that right with the compensation plans that then tie into it to make sure that you're driving the results is such an important aspect that I am in the process now of turning this guide, which is free for everybody that's interested, into a full-on book. So I will be putting together a book around how to successfully manage this annual sales planning process and some of the challenges that can come in the mix when that isn't done right. So I will be doing some research, talking with chief revenue officers, chief sales officers about some of their stories and some of their experiences so that we can share that in this book as well. And then related to that, on Monday, September 16th, I will be doing a LinkedIn Live webinar at noon Eastern on this sales plan process and where some of the pains are and how to overcome some of those pains and start to get ahead of it now that we're right at the beginning of that sales plan season.
Outstanding. Well, we're going to make sure that all those links and that opportunity to join you on that live will be in the comments. Rich, thank you so much for the time that you've spent with me here on Aloha Friday Live. Thank you for sharing your wisdom. And folks, if you are at the stage, at that mid-game stage, halftime, however you want to call it, and you're looking to actually get into the end zone, and you realizing this, say, hey, I need some help. You know, I have some things in place, but they're not getting me to where I need to. Then Rich is the person you want to talk to. Make sure to connect with him and follow him and join that webinar. Get that free resource. You can't, hey, look, I don't know how many times, Rich, I offer free stuff on the shows and I get cricket. I don't know. There's no, but folks, if you want to change, you can't just be talking about it. That's just it. If you want a better process in your company, you just can't talk about it. Yeah. Mm-hmm. That rubber needs to hit the road for you to go forward. And so if you're not doing that, then you're doing yourself a disservice. Don't blame nobody else. I don't want to hear it. If you're not doing it for yourself, then you're the problem, and you should be looking into that. And Rich is the guy that will help you navigate the course forward. Folks, thank you so much for joining us today on Aloha Friday Live. I just want to make sure to thank everybody that has subscribed to our YouTube channel at DTLW Podcast. We have finally crossed over the 700 threshold. So that is a great thing for us because we have been looking to give away this book. This book, and I talk about giveaways. This book is from Anthony Trucks. If you don't know Anthony Trucks, I have no idea what you've been doing. But look him up on LinkedIn. Look him up on the web. He is a phenomenal speaker. He was a guest of mine on DTLW last year, and he offered his book for free. So it is an amazing book, and I can't be happier than to give it away today. After this, I'll be selecting the name, and I'll be posting it. So keep an eye out for that. And, of course, if we got to 700, now we're looking for 800. So we're well on our way. We already crossed 707. You know, things are going along, and we want to thank everybody that does subscribe. We're also streaming live on Parade Deck, and I want to give a shout out to Parade Deck. It is a creator and a content creator platform for those that are military spouse, military family. They are a great support to our show, and so we want to thank the folks at Parade Deck. Finally, Rich, thank you so much, brother, for sharing this Aloha Friday with me and sharing what you do and the wisdom behind what you do.
Thank you, Enrique. It was great to see you.
All right, folks. We'll see you next week on another Aloha Friday Live. And we're looking to name that winner here in a little bit. Aloha, everybody. Have a great weekend.